Something that I say along the way will touch you. I know it. Let's begin that process of crafting a meaningful life.
Here's Mary Crafts.
Welcome back to Crafting a Meaningful Life. I'm Mary Crafts, and you know, the word is I'm always just delighted to be here with you. For me, this is how I launch my week. I get up early Monday morning. I look at what I'm going to do for my podcast. I write my podcast, or I have guests on. And then I just set my intention for the rest of the week. Based on this podcast and what we talk about. It becomes the little Post-it notes that are on my mirror that I see every day, my positive affirmations of who I've decided to be. Because I'm really about crafting my life. I don't want to just be, in the here, though, and whatever comes my way. And we're going to talk about this with my guest today, that living life as you're just batted around with the stuff that's happening day to day in the news and in your world and with your family and all this, rather than setting your own direction and making those decisions and making life happen the way you want it to happen, that you're going to craft your life. And to that end, I have two fabulous guests with me today. This is the first time we've done, I think, the video portion with two guests. So we'll see how this goes today. Welcome, Dr. Daryl Jones and Charles Mitchell.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Excited to be here.
So I'm pretty excited to have you guys. First of all, you probably didn't know this before you signed on. Most of my guests are women, because about 80% of my audience is women, okay? And not that I don't have some brave men who are watching, but I have a lot of women. And so I tend to have more women guests. But I love the idea of that dual perspective, that we definitely do approach life differently as men and women. We definitely bring, maybe different skill sets. But the idea that we live separate lives and that we really, one is from Venus and one is from Mars, does not ring with me. The same way I'm one with my sisters in Afghanistan, I'm one with you. I'm one with you as two soul-ready guys to be on my podcast. And that we find a common ground. We find a commonality. When Erica, of course, our good friend, mutual friend Erica, reached out to me and said, "Do you want to have these guys?" I said, "I don't know. You tell me." And she said, "Well, these are guys that think that we are focused way too much on the outside control, and that makes us powerless, and how to grab a hold of the inside control." I'm like, "Damn, girl, have you been watching my podcast lately?" These are just the guys I need to have on there. So one of the things I wanted to tell about each one of you, I think, Dr. Jones, you were the one that used to be a Nike executive.
Mhm.
Yes? Yeah.
Correct.
And what was the path that led you to this?
Being a Nike executive, I think, I say that somewhat jokingly. You know, for me, crafting your own journey is critical. And, I'll be honest, towards the end of my 19 and a half year tenure at Nike, it really became about that. The glossy enamel had sort of worn off about, being a Nike employee and rising through the ranks. And as I entered kind of the second stage of life, it became about what value am I adding into society? And in order to do that, I had to make sure my financial situation liberated me enough to do that. So when I saw that in my vision, Mary, it was about, okay, it's time to start moving on. So around 2015 is when I firmly made that decision to make my exit, not just being that Nike executive, that Nike guy for 20 years, but using that to channel into something a little bit at a higher level and validating some of my thoughts, validating my professional perspectives through scholarly research, and then bringing that back out into an environment that didn't just benefit me. So it was a vision that was always there, but it became stronger in the back half of my career at Nike.
I think you and I are definitely of one spirit.
Oh, that's
I
awesome.
get, yeah.
That's awesome.
Okay, Charles. Now, what I know about you is that you are actually a corporate attorney. Um, and I don't have any doubt why you left your field. My
Yeah,
brother was
it's
a
pretty easy to
corporate attorney
figure out.
for many years, and at age 60, left and went to work for one of his clients because he was done being an attorney. So tell me about your journey.
Yeah, it's interestingly enough, I started out on the same corporate track that DJ pursued out of undergraduate school, out of college, and found that it just wasn't, after working a few years with a really large multinational organization, just realized that this track probably wasn't going to be the one that I thought was going to be, um, you know, the path to allow me to really flourish, and that's the term DJ and I use and talk about a lot. And then, along the way, I'd always thought that law was an area that I really wanted to pursue, and that I had really, in my undergraduate studies, had taken a few legal courses and really enjoyed them, and had done well. And so I pursued that path and went to law school, and started practicing law. And really, until this day, I still value the skill set. There's so much knowledge and skill and competence that you develop, during the course of that study. But what I found was the work was just not necessarily what um, I'd anticipated. I do enjoy writing. I do enjoy that ability to connect with clients and customers and help solve problems, which is a lot of what lawyers do. But what I found was that, I was mostly stuck in an office drafting documents and agreements, and going through due diligence information, and using that as a stepping stone to grow in the career. And I really just had this longing and urging to be an entrepreneur. I'd always had that in the back of my mind. I've got my maternal paternal grandmother had been an entrepreneur for 60 years as a florist in a small town in the South, and was really a big inspiration for me. And I knew that at some point I wanted to pursue that path, and fortunately I was able to do that in the work that I currently do, and have never looked back.
Hmm. And no, just meeting you now for this little brief time, I can tell you're both people. You want to connect with people, and I can't imagine being an attorney and stuck in a cubicle and being the person that you are and not at some point reaching that let me the hell out of here. You gotta get out and
That
you
was really
both
hard.
are making a difference. And in my catering career, I loved my catering career. I loved the creative part. I loved working with people. I loved, creating a culture for my team. And and within my own little sphere, I created what I really wanted for my company. But then there came a point when I retired of how do I take that skill set and turn it into something bigger? And even though I'm not necessarily a global podcast, I don't have a million listeners. I sit at about 20,000 listeners. And yet I know that every time I drop that pebble, that I have the possibility to make a global difference. It's why I went to Ukraine and put my boots on the ground. It's why now I'm connecting and working with women in Afghanistan, that they not be forgotten, that we do something, that we help get them out, or we help bring education back to them. It's the difference that we can make. And you guys love that. You guys are all about crafting that. But I have to tell you, when I read the first line that Erica sent me of the things you'd like to talk about, I was like, hmm, I might have to I might have to take him to task on this one. So let's get right into it. And the
We're
first
ready.
one was why human flourishing is more critical than happiness. Okay, so before you start, let me just say that that's what we talk about here every time. That's really the goal is to be truly happy. You do first have to find out what that happiness is. and where genuine happiness comes from. It's not the thing that every piece of marketing in the world has told us. If you buy these shoes, if you start using this face cream, if you drive this car, all those things are going to bring you happiness. So you first have to define what that true happiness is. And then when the pursuit of that is where the joy really comes. But what you're saying is that it's about human flourishing and not happiness. So I think we might be on the same plane, but we might be missing each other. So let's go with that one.
Charles, do you want to jump in the wood chipper first, or you want me to go?
I'll let you go, D.
It may be a matter of terminology because the way I look at it, I won't speak for Charles. He'll do diligence for himself, but I think of happiness as a temporary state. And I'll use an example, though I am not one to love analogies and examples. A drug addict can be happy at times. They're never really flourishing, right? So I tend to focus on flourishing, which is a constant evolution to optimizing your human potential. Happiness can ebb and flow. And I think that's important that we experience that. But to me, the higher level of existence is flourishing. So, in a nutshell, that's the distinction that I make. And that's why I say flourishing is more paramount for us as humans.
I think I do understand that. And you're right, it's probably a matter of semantics.
I think it's
That's what I tell people is that my mission in this life is to be my very best self and to
absolutely right.
continue to discover all the things I can be. And then once you're on that path and not before, then when I'm lifting myself, then I can truly lift others.
Absolutely right.
Reverse doesn't happen one first and then the other. You first must lift yourself. You must, and I love that word, flourish. I might take that on, guys. Um, that it is about learning to flourish my own self and then helping others to flourish. I like
Absolutely.
that. Charles, what do you think about how he explained that?
I think DJ is spot on, because I look at it from a standpoint of when we think about happiness, it's really fleeting in some ways, right? To DJ's point around a temporary state. And when we think about flourishing, for me, it's about that constant pursuit of being better each and every day. And a lot of it's accepting where you are in life, right? And sometimes it's about the effort you put into moving forward to be better, to do better, and the awareness of where that sits, that presents for you, right? And so if you're in that place where, happiness can come and go, but if you feel like you're moving forward, each day is one more day to learn, one more day to grow, one more day to get better at whatever it is that you're doing in life as whether you're a, friend, family member, professional, or you're just trying to personally do some things for yourself where you're able to sort of take yourself from one state to another relative to, I just want to get better at learning how to meditate, right? Become a part of my practice so that that can be a journey where I can leverage that as a skill to make my life a little bit better each day.
Yes, I love that concept of focusing in on one particular item. It's hard to, look at the universe and say, okay, I'm going to be about all of you,
Hmm.
but by choosing something like meditation or something like that to bring, because one of the things I read that you have talked about is that we need a purpose-driven life and not a happiness or a pleasure-driven life. And I would totally agree with the word pleasure because sometimes we misconstrue what pleasure is. We think pleasure is happiness, and it in reality is not. When I felt like I had a pretty good sense of my mission for the longest time, which was, creating this company and what we were doing, and um, a good atmosphere for our employees and clients. And the day I retired, good friends took me all out on a boat. And we were there on the boat. We were going to savor some champagne. And one of my girlfriends turned to me and said, Mary, For all these years, you've been known as Utah's Martha Stewart, the Queen of Hospitality. What will you be known as now? And that moment I was seized with, okay, my purpose is gone. What is there? And I stood up on the back of the boat. And I said, and just like this, I just knew it just came to me. I said, from this point on, I will not be known as Utah's hospitality queen. I'll be known as the badass woman with a purpose, grace, and grit. And you ask anybody in this state, what's Mary's hashtag? They'll tell you she's a badass woman with purpose. But that's what I wanted to be about. So, how do you suggest then that people find that purpose? Does everyone have the same purpose? Are there different purposes?
I personally think that we all have a unique purpose, and I think that comes with, who we are within, right? And I think a lot of it's about understanding. I think this sometimes it's about a path in life where you really can understand who you are. I think that's a super important piece, because when you understand what makes you tick, what drives you as a human being, what's important to you, what are your values, when you can understand and articulate all those things, then I think that can lead you to a path where you can find purpose in just about anything that you do, right? I think we all have unique skills and abilities and gifts, but it's really about an understanding about how we can leverage that, and quite frankly, not just for ourselves, but for the betterment of others, right? And when we're able to be in a space where we can share these gifts with others and help others, then I think that's where we really are able to get the best out of ourselves.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, Mary, from my perspective, I think Charles said it very well. I think two things. We have to continually be building skill sets. Otherwise, we operate from our voids and not our strengths. So that's a big part of it. The second part of it is engaging in experiences that may be foreign to us. We can find purpose in that. I grew up in a pretty small town. I was in 5 different states before fifth grade, but still operated with limited experiences in some ways. And it wasn't until I started to engage in broader experiences that may have been uncomfortable or foreign to me that I started to see purpose in those experiences, in those situations. So I think it's about that too, experiences and creating experiences, moving out of comfort into discomfort, and then finding comfort over time, but also building our skill sets. If we're operating from a place of voids, we're very limited in terms of what purpose we can serve. So it's building these skill sets that I think is really, really important. And I'm personally on that constant journey. And I know Charles is as well.
Yeah, I think it is a
No,
lifelong journey. Being a lifelong
say
learner is super important.
lifelong. Yeah. Because remember, I'm living to 105 with an option to renew. So I have a lot of life lessons yet
That's right. I
We all
remember
are,
that.
Mary. We all are.
to. And I think that our purpose can change. I think that as we go through life, and I've seen that, once I retired and I started doing this podcast, I thought my purpose was to help others release the fears that have held them bound. And once they've released those fears, to discover that inner badass, to discover that light, that person that they were always meant to be. I thought that was my mission. And I was content with it. I loved it. But in January of this year, while in meditation, I had a new mission given to me. In meditation, as I had talked about, I had a woman come to me. And at first, I didn't recognize her until afterwards I remember and I knew clearly who she was. She was me. She was just my higher self who's always been with me, who knows me inside and out, who knows what I've been before and what I'm going to be in the future. And she asked me just a single question. And the question was, Mary, what is the dream of humankind? Now, that seems like a question that you would want to ponder, meditate more on, think about, maybe read up on. get back to her the next day. But it wasn't. It was immediately this natural knowing inside that I just knew. And I said to her, the dream of humankind is oneness. And she said, that is right. And that is your mission. And it changed me. It changed how I see people. It changed how I interact with people. It changed how I treat people at the grocery store. It changed. The very next night, I was dancing at a club, and I saw this woman come onto the dance floor with way too short of a skirt and way too large of legs. And I thought to myself, I wonder if she looked in the mirror before she left her house. And immediately I was seized with this thing of like, whoa, whoa, what does that thought process have to do with oneness? And I was like, nothing. I had to change my heart to be one with her. And I thought, what parts of her are really parts of me? What parts of me are really parts of her? And so, on a small, very personal, one on one basis, I'm changing the world because I've changed my heart. And then, as I connect with women in Afghanistan, I was on a Zoom call with 100 of them last week. And as I listened to them, I realized the things that they were longing for, that they felt they had been forgotten about, were the same things I wanted for me, for my children, for my grandchildren. They're no different than me. And that's what my mission is now. So as you step forward and you begin to share, one of the great things I think that you teach people with a new thing is how to step out of this crisis mode and into the really, really mode about crafting your own flourishing. How do you teach people how to do that?
Mary, I'll start because I just had a thought in my mind that came up for me as you shared about your experience there, and I think part of it is allowing our hearts to change our minds, right? And so when we're able to allow change to occur, because we take those thoughts where perhaps we're being judgmental, or we're seeing something that's very different than what is typical for how we like to move in the world, but we decide that we're going to love that person, use our heart to care and love and not judge. Our hearts change our minds. And if we can do that more, then I think we give people the ability to thrive and be whoever they need to be for themselves. And then we're able to care about them and they can care about us. It can be reciprocated. I think what happens a lot of times in our world is that we find ourselves judging one another, and that judging doesn't allow us to be in oneness and understand. And then the understanding leads to conversation, and conversation, I believe, leads to an ability to come to, you know, an idea where we're all looking for the same thing in life. We all want to be loved and cared for, right? And I think if the more we can allow our hearts to change our minds, the more we can get there.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I think, we have to start by loving ourselves. And what you experienced in that club with that big leg woman who was dancing across the floor, some of that may be a reflection on how you feel about yourself, subconsciously, right? So when we start to truly love ourselves and want what's best for ourselves, the behaviors of others that don't impact us don't mean as much to us. That's one. Two, you know, um, I was fortunate enough to find this pathway in my doctoral program to understand that self preservation is a beast. And when we operate in self preservation, it's typically strongly associated with crisis. So when we can get out of self preservation mode and into flourishing mode, operate in a way where we're impacting others' lives and we truly want what's best for other people, etc., and operate with vision and mission, like you talked about before, we can start to get out of a way of thinking that's debilitating. and into a way of thinking that not only allows us to flourish, but those around us. And then we center ourselves around those people and not people who detract from that vision.
You know, I knew that night instantly when I had those thoughts about the other woman that they were actually only thoughts about me. My
And yeah,
mentalness, my criticalness of her had everything to do with me and nothing to do with her. And bit by bit, day by day, as I walk into those challenges, and the moment that kind of thought comes into my brain about another person, I get a chance to look at me and I get a chance to change my heart.
yeah,
Yeah. It's it's been a
that's awesome, man. It really
experience.
is.
So this kind of discussion that we're having, this discussion about our consciousness actually being raised and changed, do you think we have any impact on the world as a whole? Do you think these kind of conversations can really change the world?
I think Charles is really passionate about this stuff, so I'm going to let him lead with that one.
You know, look, I'm a big believer that it takes one person, right? It's one person at a time. You know, the world is obviously, a massive place, and getting to everyone it seems impossible, right? But I think it's really about one person at a time, one day at a time, and having a consistent message about who we want to be as people and how we share that, right? And I think um, when we just give in to everything we see in social media or in politics or even culture, right? Business for that matter, we're left believing that no one cares about anything other than themselves, right? Or financial gain or how to, one-upsmanship. But I think when at the core of people really care about others and they want to do good for others. And when we give folks the entree to say, hey, let's just do this one thing. Let's just do this one thing today, have this one conversation, try to help this one person. The ripple effect of that, if we continue to do that day in and day out, the ripple effect of that is beyond what we can imagine, right? And so it's one of those things where we have to continue to be consistent and persistent to do all the things that we believe push forward society and helps other people. The more we help others, the more others will want to help the people that they're around, and so on and so forth. It's just a ripple effect.
So
We just have to keep doing the work.
we're having this great elevated conversation here about elevated consciousness. And we're doing that. And it's becoming our truth. So my question is, lots of times people, and I see this out there, back when I was in the early years of my catering business, I would cater the Miss Utah pageant. And the judges were up there asking the questions. I was in the back as the caterer and had the food in the back, but I would come in and listen. And they would always ask the same question every single year, which was, what do you see as the biggest problem facing the world today? And as these candidates, um, pageant candidates would answer, they would be great things. They would be things like, world peace or hunger or education. And I'm in the back screaming one word only. Every single year, I'm screaming this one word, one word. And the word was accountability. Accountability, guys. That's our biggest problem in the world, okay? If we all took accountability for who we were, if we all took accountability for what's happening in our lives, if we all took accountability that we are not victims of our parents or of our upbringing or of, whatever physical deformity that we had or, whatever our parents taught us that we were nothing or whatever it is, if we took accountability, the whole world would be different. And that has become my truth. My question is then, since not one of those pageant candidates said that, is this our best path to teaching accountability that what we believe in our brain is what's going to happen in our lives? And if we believe good things are coming, guess what, guys? Good things are coming. If we believe the bad things are coming, guess what? Bad things are coming. But tell me how you think we change the world, how we teach that truth. to others?
Well, I think a big part of it is to realize that our journey is full of peaks and valleys, and that we can't brand our journey based on fleeting moments in that journey. So when things that aren't in the plan happen to us, that's part of the plan, whether we realize it or not. And you hold yourself accountable for that as
I
well,
like that.
right? Yeah, that's I firmly believe that. And to get emotional and this emotional roller coaster about, in and out of happiness and in and out of trials and tribulations, this is just life. So I think that's one. Number two, I'll say it again, and Dr. D. Martini, who was on the show with Charles and
Oh, he was on
he
the
talks
show.
about,
I love him.
oh man, that dude's amazing. He is an amazing dude. And this whole thing about operating from voids, the more we build our own personal skill sets and thoughtware, spiritual being, physical being, the less we operate from voids and the more we are accountable for our own actions. And I think that's 100% the truth. And I subscribe to that. Lastly, a shameless plug for hundreds of thousands of dollars I spent in the doctoral program. Um, Understanding the role of self preservation in crisis has been a blessing for me. And I think it's we have to start to really teach not just the younger generation, but all generations, that we often operate in self preservation mode and crisis mode and don't realize it on a daily basis. We are actually in crisis and we never really absorb and realize the fact that we're operating in crisis. But you've gone through a journey that you described very explicitly where you're moving out of this crisis self preservation mode into service and flourishing. We need to teach people about that journey.
Yeah. And before I used to think that I was a compassionate person. Um, and I was going through the actions of being very service oriented and serving people. But there became a point in my journey when I realized that those were just actions. My heart had not been changed. And the reason I was so critical of most all of my listeners know this story, but I'll share it with you. The reason I was so critical of that woman on the dance floor was because at age 50, I weighed 284 pounds. Me. At age 50, I couldn't find clothes to fit into. At age 50, I was so critical and judgmental of myself, I couldn't see my way through. At age 50, I was so not enough. Even though I was a successful business owner and an entrepreneur and all the awards in the world, inside, I was not healed. And now, through that journey, 18 years since I started that journey now, I've learned how to change my heart and the difference between compassion and acting about service and true and genuine empathy. I know that that's a big word for you, that word empathy. Why does that matter so much to you that people actually empathetically feel other people?
Well, I think when you feel for other people, you also feel for yourself, right? Because we're all flawed in some way. And I think the more we are able to have empathy for others and allow grace for them, it allows us to step into the things that are uncomfortable for us, right? So that we can try to be better. Um, and again, I think, one of the things that I wanted to go back to, you talk about accountability is a big piece that we all need. I think accountability is one, and then I think the other thing is choice. We choose, to DJ's point, I think he talked about this a little bit earlier. Life happens to all of us. It's what we do when those things happen. It's a part of the plan. Now we have to choose how we're going to deal with that. And again, choosing to either, I'm going to use this as a teachable moment so that I can learn to grow and thrive. Or am I going to use this as an opportunity to be a victim And now I can start to blame everything away to things that had nothing to do with the choices I made. The more we can to take accountability for who we are and the choices that we make, I think that also allows us to be more empathetic, allows us to have the ability to thrive and move forward, and then ultimately, going back to the things we talk about a lot, ultimately allows you to flourish because nothing stands in your way when you can accept who you are and you're really good with that and you feel good about you and who you are and where your life is headed.
Yeah,
All because we want to be accountable for our actions and
yeah,
things we have happen.
I had taken up residency in Victimville, no doubt. I loved it there. It was nothing was my fault. I wasn't accountable for anything. Um, my weight wasn't my fault. It was my genetics, and I was big boned, and I was a chef, and never trust a skinny chef, and on and on. All sorts of excuses for making up for where I was, and it was just out of fear. I was afraid I wasn't enough, afraid I couldn't succeed, afraid if I really came out and showed people who I really was inside, no one would like me. I lived this facade of a life for 50 years. That's why I have to live to 105. At least need more years on the real side of life than on the fake side of life. And self-preservation was my go-to. It's the only reason I did everything. Fear ruled my life with every decision. Whether or not that's why I was such a good caterer, because I was so afraid of failing, so afraid of having to give somebody money back, so afraid what people would say about me if I wasn't the best. And then to learn, like, you know what? I can do the same thing from the love position than fear. I was just as good a caterer when I served people because I loved them and I wanted to be the very best for them. I could do the same actions, but from a love position, and the feeling is different. The feeling is different for me. The feeling was different for them. And I think that that's one of the biggest things when we realize that fear does not have to be our go-to. And you talk a lot about that what I call fear and you call self-preservation to get people to step out of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's important. When we operate from, mistrust, distrust, and fear, we aren't optimizing our skill sets. We're suppressing really valuable skill sets in order to combat the fear. That's our primary concern. So all these critical skill sets are subdued and suppressed, and we aren't optimizing who we are and what we bring to the table.
Yeah, you guys actually have your own podcast where you talk about all these fabulous things. So tell me about what you do in your real world. You have a podcast, I believe is it The Conscious Vibe?
It is, and can I just want to add one more thing to what DJ just shared before we jump into conscious vibe. But I think when you put those two things together, right, you put in, we get beyond self-preservation, we get beyond fear. I think the next thing is vulnerability, right? And so when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, then so many things open up, right? Because now we're able to see our true selves. Others are able to see us as well, and the freedom in that is just amazing. I think it allowed you to, again, I don't want to beat this word to death, but it's that moving towards flourishing. The vulnerability is a big part of that.
I have a lot of people ask me, what's the passageway? How do I move from living a fear-based life to living a love-based life? How did you know what the passageway looked like? And I said, I don't know the entire passageway because I'm still in it. But I'm closer to the love than I ever have been. But I do know just what you said, Charles. The first step into the passageway is vulnerability. It's being willing to show a crack, to be our real selves, to get naked, emotionally naked. And when we begin to do that, we offer people the opportunity to love us and care for us in spite of our non-perfectionism. And I constantly felt like I had to look like I was perfect. And how many people do you think wanted to snuggle up close to this perfect woman? Not many. But the moment I began to show all my flaws and my fears and be vulnerable with that, I began not only to find more people engaging with me, but me engaging with me and loving all those flaws that were in me and loving the gifts that we step forward in. Okay, if people want to continue this conscious talk and conversation and raise the vibration in the world, talk to me about your podcast, Conscious Vibe, and how people can continue to connect with you.
So Charles and I have conscious discussions and conscious conversations around human journey, culture, race, business, and inevitably these things sort of find their way into politics. We very rarely will lead with politics, and it's not necessarily our goal. But we are really, really enchanted with human journey, accomplishment, success, and failure, and culture. So empowerment is a big thing for Charles and I, and we try to spend a lot of time on our show talking about how do we all get to self-optimization and empowerment through our guests.
A super consistent.
Yeah, I think we use the conversations as inspiration because we know that when people hear stories of others taking a journey and a path in life that's very different or perhaps even similar to their own, um, it can spark something in someone to say, "Hey, I can do that," or "I've been there," or "That's been a part of what I've experienced in life," and they found a way to overcome that, and I can too. So I think those conversations allow people to see, this conscious dialogue about things that we all deal with in life that are just super critical and very very uh, they're very very applicable to everything we do each day in our lives.
I just finished my first book, which is called Unbounded, From Sorrow to Summit. And it talks about finally, just before turning 66, I summited Kilimanjaro, which for me represented that journey. And even though there are still summits out there in front of me yet to be climbed, it was able to say, I looked at all you fears. I looked you right in the face. And I said, I am better than you. I am more than you. I am like this beautiful woman that was made. And my only goal in life now is to create us together, to help people that realize that I'm not unique. Even though I am unique in who I am, all of us have this light inside. Each of us are more than we ever dreamed of, that we ever imagined. And that's what I want to share with people. So if people would love to listen in, tell me how they find the Conscious Vibe.
tcvpodcast.com. TCV, the Conscious Vibe, podcast.com is the simplest way. And there you can enter portals for YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, etc. But tcvpodcast.com
Okay.
is the
Put
main portal.
link to the podcast so people can definitely find you and learn more from you two absolutely brilliant people. Absolutely. Thank you for being with me today. Thank you for helping me and my listeners craft a better, more enlightened, more conscious, meaningful life. Namaste.
Thank you for having us, Mary.
Namaste. Thank you for having us, Mary. You be well.
Listen to the full podcast today and subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and more. Crafting a Meaningful Life with Mary Crafts.